Today's hearing is entitled "The White House Narratives on the Iran Nuclear Deal." I think this is important that we take this up and deal with this situation as we get going. There's three items I'd ask unanimous consent to enter into the record. The first is the New York Times Magazine article, "The Aspiring Novelist Who Became Obama's Foreign Policy Guru." The second is a letter from the White House of May 16th. This is a letter addressed to me, copied to the ranking member, Mr. Cummings, and it's from Neil Eggleston talking about how the White House would not make Ben Rhodes available to the committee today. And I'd also like to enter into the record May 16th letter. This is from Senators Cornyn, Senator Mark Kirk, and Senator John Barrasso. Without objection, I'd like to enter these three into the record. Without objection, so ordered. Iran. It's one of three countries that are still on the state sponsors of terrorism. And I think it's important that we have some clarity. There are some issues that are outstanding. It's one of the most important foreign policy initiatives that the President has taken forward, but I still think it demands a lot of clarity. We were hoping that the clarity would be provided by Benjamin Rhodes. He's the Assistant to the President and Deputy National Security Advisor for Strategic Communications and Speech Writing. He's obviously a very talented and trusted person in the White House. I do not doubt his talents and his knowledge, but the deal that had been spun up and sold to the American people, I'm not sure was as clear as it should have been. And I have serious questions about the transparency, the truthfulness, and when it really ultimately started. And I think those are legitimate questions as we move forward, because here you have a state sponsor of terrorism in Iran, and we still don't fully know the answer to a lot of these questions. Now, some may think they know the answers to all these questions, but there's still a shroud of secrecy, and I think this is a very viable thing to look at. Mr. Rhodes was in a unique position to offer this perspective, given his heavy duty and work on this. What is mystifying to me is how readily available he made himself to the media, but only select media, those in his echo chamber. He showed obvious disdain for people with foreign policy credentials. He showed great disdain for the media themselves. He's entitled to those personal opinions, but he also elected to share those with the New York Times and put them out there. He was also very negative about Congress, going so far as to saying could not have a rational discussion, I'm summarizing here, with the Congress. So we provided that. Josh Earnest from the podium there at the White House openly mocked Congress and said that perhaps we should be calling other members up, such as Senator Tom Cotton, who should also raise their right hand and swear and affirm and answer questions. I took that suggestion, shared it with Senator Cotton. We accommodated that. Mr. Cotton, Senator Cotton, had agreed, if Mr. Rhodes would be here, to also be here to answer questions and ferret out any of these details. But Mr. Rhodes elected not to speak. Now, he does have a public speaking engagement today. He's out giving a public speech today, but refuses to come and speak with Congress. I'm going to play a clip. I got two clips in my opening statement, and I think you can see where maybe some on the other side of the aisle will say, oh, we know everything about this, it's been thoroughly debated, but I want you to watch this clip. We're going to go to clip, what we call clip B, if we could, and let's watch this.
Sure. One final question on this subject. There have been reports that intermittently and outside of the formal P5+1 mechanisms, the Obama administration or members of it have conducted direct, secret bilateral talks with Iran. Is that true or false?
We have made clear, as the Vice President did at Munich, that in the context of the larger P5+1 framework, we would be prepared to talk to Iran bilaterally. But with regard to the kind of thing that you're talking about on a government-to-government level, no.
Can I ask you just one more
Yeah.
thing on this? I notice you have... Let me try it one last way,
Okay.
Jen, and I appreciate your indulgence.
Sure.
Is it the policy of the State Department where the preservation of the secrecy of secret negotiations is concerned to lie in order to achieve that goal?
James, I think there are times where diplomacy needs privacy in order to progress. This is a good example of that.
So as you can see there, Victoria Nuland offered what turned out to be absolutely and totally not true. Ms. Psaki I think, was more candid in that assessment. And then you have this article comes out, and basically the administration thought it was in their best interest to spin up this story that negotiations started with a more moderate regime in 2013, but that's not what had happened. That was fiction as well. I also want to talk about 24/7 access. I think the American people were led to believe that Americans with the best interest would have access and be able to see and get in there and go into these nuclear facilities 24/7. So I want to play another clip. This is clip number E, or letter E.
So the Israelis have put out this list of things that they think should be in the final deal with Iran, including allowing inspectors to go anywhere, anytime. That seems perfectly reasonable, no?
Well, Jake, first of all, under this deal, you will have anywhere, anytime, 24/7 access as it relates to the nuclear facilities that Iran has. You will also have access to...
What about the military facilities?
So what we'll have under this deal, Jake, is the strongest inspections regime that any country faces in the world. And what that means is if we see a site that we need to inspect on a military facility, we can get access to that site and inspect it. So if it's a suspicious site that we believe is related to its nuclear efforts, we can get access and inspect that site through the IAEA.
Ben told Jake Tapper of CNN on April 6th, and I quote, "Under this deal, you will have anywhere, anytime, 24/7 access as it relates to the nuclear facilities that Iran has." Is that a lie?
No, to their nuclear facilities, there is 24/7 access to Iran's to verify their compliance with the agreement.
24/7 access, anytime, anywhere.
To their nuclear facilities. That's the quote you just read me, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Now, over the past week, I've spoken at length about what exactly this deal is. I also want to make clear what this deal was never intended to be. First of all, as the chief negotiator, I can tell you I never uttered the words anywhere, anytime, nor was it ever part of the discussion that we had with the Iranians.
Thanks. You can take that down. So, first of all, as somebody pointed out in our committee, I think Mr. Palmer pointed out, I don't think Mr. Kerry was the chief negotiator, but that's another point. But the second part of it is there 24/7 access? Can you access anything, anywhere, anytime? Spinning quite a different story as we go along. We've also heard a lot of numbers related to sanctions relief and dealing with escrowed oil funds. President Obama was quoted in an Atlantic article talking about $150 billion that would be going back to Iran. The Iranians say they have access to $100 billion. The Treasury Department says it's $50 billion. Secretary Kerry said they've only had access to $3 billion and then blamed Treasury. Talking about a lot of money going to a state sponsor of terrorism. There's also questions about ballistic missiles. On December 2015, they said there was a violation of the United Nations Resolution 2231 in testimony by the Iran deal coordinator, Ambassador Moll. But in March of 2016, you have Ambassador Power to the United States Ambassador Power to the United Nations who toned it down a little bit. Now they're calling it just an inconsistent with, is their quote, as opposed to a violation of the United Nations resolution. Then you also have issues about boosting Iran's economy. Secretary Kerry is currently on tour in Europe. The State Department suggests that we're obligated, the United States of America is obligated to boost the economy, the Iranian economy. Again, something we need to understand. We don't understand the side deals. There's still sanctions of terrorism on Iran. We want to understand that. And then there's questions about everything that has actually been agreed to, not just in writing, but side deals and any other verbal commitments that were also made. I would also note to our colleagues that the chairman of Armed Services, Mr. Thornberry has a very important amendment I think we should all consider and look at that will be part of the NDAA issue as we move forward. Again, there are a lot of outstanding questions. We wanted to get the person who is right in the thick of things from the White House to come here and testify. The White House, on Thursday, claimed that this wasn't about executive privilege, and then less than 24 hours before this hearing, they reversed course and said, oh, it is about executive privilege. Now, who's being inconsistent? Who is being inconsistent? You have plenty of time, Mr. Rhodes, to go out and talk to all of the media friends and talk to the echo chamber that you brag about in the New York Times, but when it comes time to actually answer hard questions under oath, they decide not to do it. My time has far exceeded what we had allocated. We'll now recognize the ranking member, Mr. Cummings.
Thank you very much.